But would a move affect the beautiful game? Well, sports psychologist Dr. Paul McCarthy and Connie McLaughlin, who's a sports behavioural coach, join me now in the studio. Thank you both very much for coming in to chat to us. It's a venue. Some would say, does it really matter where the game's held? What do you think?
Well, I suppose there are a few factors that we would consider. One would be the crowd size, and the second would be crowd noise. And perhaps after that, we'd be looking at things like familiarity and territoriality. And collectively, what they mean is that with a home advantage, teams tend to play better on average compared with playing away.
Well, Hampden is ingrained in our culture when it comes to talking about sporting culture, and there's certainly a lot of history to it. But sometimes a change is good. What do you think, Connie?
Listening to that package there and the thought of the Hampden roar being silenced, that almost breaks my heart. That's not what we want to hear. There's so much nostalgia, there's so much history at Hampden, and as a supporter, as a former broadcaster in terms of reporting sport for so long, but also now, you know, and looking at it from a different lens within football, you can see that a change needs to be made. But, you know, there's been so many historic moments that we've seen it. I think it's important to keep that edge and that connection to it.
And you'll have been there firsthand, Connie, of course, being a former broadcast journalist. You'll have been there for all the big moments, the embarrassing moments too, yeah?
Listen, I think there's been more heartache for me at Hampden Park than there's been anything else. I spoke to a few players actually this morning about this when I seen the news about would it be Murrayfield or would it be Hampden, and it's quite clear to see that there's not a lot of love from a player's perspective for Hampden. It's a difficult stadium. You're not as connected energetically, I suppose, to the fans, and you know, talking about that thing about does that give us an advantage, and clearly that's definitely an important part of it. But also, should we not be investing our money and our time into redeveloping Hampden Park, making it better rather than looking elsewhere?
That could be an option, but some people might say a fresh start might be good. What do you think, Paul?
Yes, I guess the main focus should always be on how it helps the national team to succeed, and whether that is increased size, better facilities, increased familiarity and better surfaces to play on. Those would be long-term drivers for participation, not only in that sport but sports throughout Scotland. Now,
you both work often with players, that's part of your job now. What impact do you think this would have on players, you know, on their psyche and just their mental state, I suppose, going into a game?
Yeah, well, the critical factor is always coping and how players cope with the conditions. So when they're at home, they tend to have a greater testosterone response. They're able to compete better, and less so when they're away. But over time, it's the familiarity with the playing surface and the home support that they get most used to. And over time, that's what creates the greatest advantage for them.
Well, interestingly, STV Scotland Tonight is running a viewer survey on which stadium they'd prefer. Now, it's by no means scientific, of course, but just before we came on air, the figures showed 39% wanted Hampden and 61% for Murrayfield. What do you make of that, Connie? Look at your face, you're not impressed.
No, that shocks me. Murrayfield is synonymous with rugby. It's not a football stadium. It's a nice holiday home for us, you know, for Celtic, for Hearts very recently, but it's not the home of Scottish football. As far as I'm concerned, that is Hampden Park, you know, it is the home of our national team. And I think that we have to be smart with this. We can't be reactive to this. There's obviously financial implications in terms of what the SFA have to pay Queen's Park, and there's lots of different things going on behind the scenes, I think, as well. But in terms of just as somewhere that says Scottish football, that's Hampden for me.
Paul, very briefly, what do you think? Hampden, Murrayfield?
Yeah, I would always go for tradition.
Good.
Over crowd size.
All right, both, thank you very much for joining us in the studio.